Sahana bhavatu sahanau bhunaktu sahaviryam karavavagai tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vidvishavagai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Harihi Om. Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Harihi Om.
That was wonderful. Really excited to restart this session. We had a long break, in fact, almost 6 to 7 weeks. Every week, something or the other popped up. Even last week, we scheduled, and 3-4 people had the festival, right? Taipuyam. It was there. So that's why it got delayed. Finally, we are getting started. So since it's some time, probably I thought, why don't we just recap the first 27 verses and then restart from verse 28. We'll do a recap for the first 45 minutes. And I got some interesting questions. So we will discuss that at the end. 2 questions I got. Both of them are really good questions. So we can discuss that after that. And please feel free to jump in and add or supplement, because this is not a class, but it's a discussion with all of us. So the whole purpose of starting this Vedanta series was, a lot of people look Vedanta as a philosophy. We wanted to move away from that, and we wanted to understand what is Vedanta, how it is critical to us, what is the value of that Vedanta in our day-to-day life. So that was our major objective. And if you remember, we did a series of 16 sessions summarizing the content of the Vedanta. What exactly the different ideas covered in the Vedantic textbooks. So we covered that. And then we thought, before getting into an Upanishad, we will start with a Prakarana Grantha. So we had different choices. And finally, we picked up Atmabodha, which is one of the most beautiful Prakarana Grantha. So we started our session, if you remember, by giving a very high-level introduction to the different categories of scriptures in our portfolio of scriptures. So a lot of people get confused. What exactly is the foundation textbooks of our Sanatana Dharma or the Vedic heritage? A lot of people even say that Bhagavad Gita is the Hindu Bible. That itself is wrong. The foundation textbook of our culture is Vedas. So we found Vedas as our foundational textbooks. And the end portion of the Vedas is known as Vedanta. That is one way of looking at that. That is the literal meaning. But the implied meaning or the figurative meaning of what is Vedanta is the ultimate or the ultimate knowledge described in the Vedas. Because what exactly is the most ultimate knowledge? Any knowledge that helps me to understand myself. Because if I don't understand myself, how can I relate with other people? How can I relate with the world? And how can I relate with God? So the first knowledge and most important knowledge anybody needs to have is the knowledge about myself. And the Vedanta provides that. And also, even though that is the strict definition of the Vedanta, any textbook, any body of knowledge that covers the subject matter of this Vedanta or the end portion of the Veda or the Upanishad also can be broadly considered as Vedanta. So if you apply that larger definition or the larger scope, you can say that Upanishads can be considered as Vedanta, Bhagavad Gita can be considered as Vedanta, Upanishads can be, the Brahma Sutras can be considered as Vedanta, and even the Prakarana Granthas are considered as Vedanta. So that is one way of looking at Vedanta. Vedanta means any subject matter, if a body of knowledge is in line with the subject matter of the Upanishads, that can be broadly considered as Vedanta. And in this Vedantic series, there is a lot of books or the textbooks or scriptures. Of course, the primordial scripture is Upanishads. We talked about number of Upanishads, around 108 Upanishads are there. And out of that, there are 10 Upanishads, popular Upanishads. Why? Because Shankaracharya wrote Bhashyam, or the commentary for that Upanishad. It is not because of Shankaracharya wrote Bhashyam they are important. Shankara chose to write Bhashyam for the most important Upanishad. Because if you take one Upanishad, it is a vertical slice of the whole portion. It is a point of view by a particular sage. So if you collect and study all the Upanishads commented by Shankara, you will get a full understanding of the Vedic literature, Vedantic literature. So Upanishads is the first category of our Vedic science. I use the word science. It is not science. It is neither philosophy. It is not science. Veda is a darshana. That is the word we should use. Because philosophy means what? We already talked about that. It is the love for knowledge. That's not what Veda is. We are not loving Veda. We are not going to Veda because we are loving knowledge. It's not like studying physics. It's like studying a literature. We are studying Veda to understand myself. So there is a huge difference. So if somebody masters Bhagavad Gita, and if you don't understand himself, Swami Chinmayananda used to say, like, it's a waste of time. So that's why it is known as darshana. Darshana means it's a vision. It's a vision that helps me to see myself. That is Upanishads. The second category of scriptures, anybody remember? We talked about at least 5 categories of scriptures.
Itihasa.
Itihasas. Itihasas means Vedas by itself, it's hard to understand. So what Vyasa did was, he embedded this Vedic truth in story forms, and he wrote 2 major Itihasas. Of course, one is Vatmiki. Vatmiki composed Ramayana, and Vyasa composed Mahabharata. 88,000 verses of Mahabharata and almost 24,000 verses of Ramayana. It is a Veda in action. It is an elaboration of the Veda. So that is Itihasas. Next one.
Purana.
Puranas, exactly. Itihasas means that what is happened here. Purana means it is in the story form. It is the stories of the Devas. All these stories to make you understand again the truth. So there are 18 Puranas and 18 Upapuranas. And we saw that one Purana is extremely popular, Bhagavata. So Upanishads, Vedas, it's not Vedas and Upanishads, right? You might have seen a lot of people making that mistakes. They say Vedas and Upanishad. Of course, Upanishad is a part of the Veda. So it's not 2. Upanishad is a part of the Veda. Second category of scripture is Itihasas. And one thing to be highlighted from a Vedantic perspective about Itihasa is one of the most popular scriptures of the Sanatana Dharma is part of an Itihasa. Which one?
Bhagavad Gita.
Bhagavad Gita. Bhagavad Gita is part of Mahabharata. Bhagavad Gita is not just the only one scriptures available in Mahabharata. The Vishnu Sahasranama is part of Mahabharata. Anugita is part of Mahabharata. Ramayana also has beautiful teachings like Vibhishana Gita, Rama Gita. All these is part of Ramayana also. So Ramayana and Bhagavata are embedded or overloaded or encapsulated versions of the Upanishads. So if you read Ramayana and Mahabharata and miss the Vedanta, it's a problem. Of course, you can enjoy the story. That's a different matter. But you miss the point, missing the obvious. So Upanishads, Itihasas, Puranas. What is next?
Sutras.
Sutras, exactly. Sutra is in a codified form. You describe the truth. Very systematic, very ordered, in a code form, in the form of an equation they represents. So 3 sutras are very popular. Vedanta Sutra or the Brahma Sutra of Vyasa, Yoga Sutra of the Patanjali, and Bhakti Sutra of the Narada are the popular sutras. So that is the next category of the literature. And what is the one more category? Prakarana Granthas. Prakarana Granthas are introductory textbook. I cannot say that it is introductory. Most of the Prakarana Granthas are introductory textbooks, because before you go and study Bhagavad Gita or Upanishads or Brahma Sutra, you need to understand the vocabulary and the technical terms. Without that, you will be completely confused. What exactly is the technical term means? So this scriptures gives us an introduction so that we can get into the study of the Upanishads or the Bhagavad Gita. Such books are known as Prakarana Granthas. One category. Second category of Prakarana Grantha means once you study the Upanishads, again, as I said, like Upanishads are not in an orderly fashion. The verses go from here, there, everywhere. Once you study an Upanishad, if you want to reconcile the teaching and understand that in an ordered manner, there are some post-study Prakarana Granthas. So these are the two categories of Prakarana Grantha. Anybody can tell a couple of examples for the introductory Prakarana Granthas?
Manisha Panchakam, Atmabodha,
Atmabodha,
Atmabodha, Vivek Chudamani, Aparoksha Anubhuti.
Anubhuti.
Exactly. All these are introductory Prakarana Grantha. And the second category of Prakarana Grantha, Dakshinamurti Stotra. A lot of people may think that it is a devotional hymn. It is not. It is ultimate Vedantic teaching. Panchadashi. It is not even by Shankaracharya. It is by Vidyaranya. Its meaning, it is not by the Adi Shankaracharya. Vidyaranya is from the Shankaracharya's lineage, but it is not by Adi Shankaracharya. It is an amazing textbook. So this is a very high level overview of our scriptural portfolio. That is what we have seen. And that is why we selected Atmabodha, because Atmabodha is a Prakarana Grantha. This book has almost 18 verses, 68 verses. So 68 verses covers the entire Vedanta. And why I like Atmabodha very much is every verse in Atmabodha, almost every verse, not every verse, but almost every verse comes with a beautiful example. So we covered up to verse 30 in our previous season, last season or last year. So means I will summarize up to verse 27. Let's just quickly summarize the verses up to 27 and then we can proceed. So this 27 verses are divided into 4 major topics. So the first topic is the introduction. Introduction gives a spiritual roadmap. It is a spiritual road journey, means suppose you're taking a spiritual journey and it gives a roadmap, how you proceed from beginning to end, what is the path. That is what is given in the introductory verses 1 to 9. And then from verse 10 to 16, the first major problem, because even though I am consciousness, I am Atma, that is not what my experience is. We call it as Viparita Bhavana. So what exactly is the problem of the superimposition? Because something else is superimposed on me. So that problem is discussed in verse 10 to 16. And on 17 to 20, we hear a brilliant exposition of the all-pervading Atma. What is the nature of that all-pervading Atma? And from verse 20 to 27, Shankaracharya describes like, so we heard about the problem of superimposition, we heard about Atma, and he then from verse 20 to 27, he clearly tells how this false attribution, again, why I get identified with my mental activities. Because the mental activities are different from me, but what happens is I get identified with my mental activities. So these are the topic we covered. So 4 topic: introduction, problem of superimposition, the nature of Atma, and the false identification with the mental activities. So we can go a little bit in deep. So before that, any questions or any comments anybody want to make?
Rajesh, end portion of Vedas
Yeah.
is Vedanta.
Correct.
There are 4 Vedas, so there will be 4 Vedantas.
Actually, good question, Rohit ji. So Veda is considered as a one huge body of knowledge. So initially, there was only one Veda. And then came our famous and most respected saint Veda Vyasa. And he divided the Veda into 4 categories: Rik, Yajus, Sama, Atharva. One Veda is mainly focused on the poetic style. The other one is a metric style, then like a prose style, and a combined style. So the end portion of each Vedas will have Upanishads. So the Vedanta, if you take the Vedanta cut across all the 4 Vedas, you will see some Upanishads in Rig Veda, you will see some Upanishads in Yajurveda, and you will see some Upanishads in Samaveda, and finally even in Atharva Veda. So that's what it is.
So the end portion of Vedas, which is called Vedanta,
Yeah.
Is that the same as Upanishads? Or
Correct.
is that...
That is what is Upanishads. The
But then
end portion of the Veda. So in other words, Upanishads are part of the Veda.
Okay, but there are 110 Upanishads versus 4 Vedas, which
Correct.
is how is that reconciled?
Okay, so one Upanishad means one Veda can have multiple Upanishads.
Okay, I see.
And to be very precise, out of that all 108 Upanishads in the modern world, not all of them are from the Veda. Some of them are, for example, the Yoga Upanishads, which was added later. So that means that goes to my second broader definition, right? The broader definition is what? Like any body of knowledge with the same subject matter of Upanishad can be considered as Vedanta. But to answer your question, one Veda can have multiple Upanishads.
Okay.
Rajesh ji, so the Vedanta is Upanishad. So what is Upanga?
Upanga. Okay. So see, there are Veda is like a tree, right? So there are so many other body of knowledge. You may need to study Vedas. For example, you may need Niruttam, which is not part of the Veda, but you may want to study that for understanding the Veda properly. So that is known as Vedanga or Upanga, etc. So the Chandas, the meter, the grammar, all those things you need to understand for studying Veda. So then actually there are other sub-Vedas are there, right? Dhanurveda, Ayurveda. So all that is there. That would be separate from Veda, but all these are linked to the Veda. But what we are talking here is the actual Veda. Veda literally means knowledge. And this knowledge, if you really think about the knowledge, the main knowledge about myself, about the world, and about the God, and the relationship with all these 3.
Rajaji, Patanjali Yoga Sutras, which of the scriptures do they come under?
It comes under the name, the name of the scripture itself has the category of the scripture. What is that?
Sutras.
Exactly.
Sutra.
Yeah.
So that's yet another category.
It is a different category. So Patanjali Yoga Sutra is a later work, but it is based upon the teachings of the Vedas.
Okay.
Clear? Brahma Sutra. Brahma Sutra is also a separate scripture in the sutra form referring to Vedas.
So Rajaji, all of this is so humongous and so very, like, sometimes confusing also. What's the coursework? What's the order of studying?
Order of study. So if you don't have much time, study only one book, Bhagavad Gita.
Yeah.
So they say, Gita Sugita Kartavyaha Kim Anyai Shastra Vistare. If you study Bhagavad Gita properly, you don't need to study any other scriptures. Now, why you have this vast literature? Because sometimes different example, different style, different means of conversing, That may make the concept very clear.
Hmm.
So somebody, I think it was Gina, you only asked, right? If you really go in depth, once we went to the introduction to Vedanta and Atmabodha, there is nothing new, right? Everything is just the same thing. That's exactly what it is.
So Rajesh ji, my question is the Chandam, Chandas and this meter aphorisms, all those things, like especially the sutras. Is that necessary for us to understand? Because I think that these are important to study the Veda. Like when you want to chant, how you want to chant,
Yeah,
you should
exactly.
know how to do it. But
Exactly.
to understand itself, the knowledge of it, do we need to read all those things?
No, not necessarily, because earlier ancient times people used to dedicate their life to study Vedas. So they used to chant in properly, right? So when you chant Vedas, you have to use certain tones, right? That means there are the pitch and the swaras like Anudata, Urdata, Surita. So you need to understand to chant it properly. So if you want to chant Veda, definitely you have to learn the chandas and also all that rules. And Nirukta means it's the dictionary created by the sage called Yaska. Nirukta is important because if you want to study without a teacher, what is going to happen? Like every word, the word Atma in different context means different things. So how do you interpret these technical terms in line with the teaching? So Niruktam gives the meaning. So that's why it is support systems for me to understand and study Veda properly. In modern world, like that's where you have the teachers. The teachers will study or learn that and try to explain that to us. So it's not practical. You cannot study the Upangas, all the like the Upavedas and Vedas. Even one Veda itself, it is very hard to study. So that's why we need to study like, so Arnabji, to answer your question, if you don't have much time, study Bhagavad Gita. And if you don't have time to study the entire Bhagavad Gita, I would suggest one chapter. What is that chapter? Chapter 2. Chapter 2 of the Gita, because it's the roadmap of the entire Gita. Now, if you want to go for a comprehensive study, then you may want to study, means you may want to start with a Prakarana book like Atmabodha. Then you want to study the Prasthanatraya, Bhagavad Gita, Brahma Sutra, and this 10 Upanishads. And then you want to study like one yoga part, which is the Yoga Sutra, Bhakti Sutra. And if you want to study one Purana, I would suggest Bhagavata. It will take years.
Maybe a lifetime.
Yeah, no, it may not be if you are dedicated. But look at Shankaracharya. How many years he lived? Anybody knows?
30,
39,
32.
32.
Yeah.
32.
So in that 32 years, he commented upon all the, means 10 Upanishads he wrote commentary. He composed hundreds of work, including Vivek Chudamani, which has 700 verses. He commented upon Bhagavad Gita. He commented upon Brahma Sutra. All that is done. You know, by 1819, he composed most of his commentaries and bhashyas.
Actually, these scriptures are such that once you start understanding any text, start, and it starts like a fire, and you want to study like everything that is.
Yep.
This question that should I study this, should I study that, doesn't arise at all actually. Then you want this, you want this. In fact, you want to stop your brain asking these questions. You want to stop doing that one. It starts like a fire. Believe me, this one, right? It starts literally like a fire, that is. You want to study everything. You start everything, every scripture you want to study, because there's so much in that. You will be blown away by each scripture, that is.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah.
Totally agree, Vijayji. But where do you enter the fire from?
You would figure out that one. Absolutely. The mind, when it stops, then slow curve goes up, right? And then steep it goes up and then plateaus, and slowly your mind stops asking questions. and then quieten slowly. Okay, so it's very difficult to next. It's like a fantasy, like if I explain you wouldn't get it actually, but you have to go through that one, just like you're asking questions like that, right? But you just start with just as Rajesh said, start with Bhagavad Gita, right? And then slowly, when you start understanding the concepts and everything, right, then actually starts literally like a fire.
Yeah, and one more thing, Arnabji, right? So initially, you start appreciating this with an intellectual satisfaction. That is how it starts.
Yeah.
But slowly, you see that there are some values you see out of it. The first change would be you would start to appreciate, right, the normal situation. That's one big change, because Shankaracharya writes in his commentary, like, if you get up and if you don't have a problem, that's one reason for you to be happy. And this is being called out even in the book called Search Inside Yourself. That's one immediate change. You try to appreciate what you have, and then slowly you start building this resilience. Even though you may not get the self-realization, but there is a lot of changes happen in you. So I would suggest, even if it is an intellectual curiosity, start with this. And once you slowly get into this, it starts speaking back to you. That's for sure.
Let me add to that a little bit, Rajesh.
Yeah.
Just one more thing. So Swamiji used to say, Swami Sarathananda, when we talk about the consciousness, his favorite statement was, a consciousness और एक चीज नहीं है. He used to say, और एक चीज नहीं है. So you have a textbook, you have a table, you have a person, you have a tree, and then you have a consciousness. No, it's not like that. Okay. So similarly, when you're reading a mathematics book and you have a chemistry book, you do some software thing, and then evening or weekend you come and Atmabodha or some scriptures. It's not like that. The studying of these scriptures is entirely different thing, because it transforms you completely. That is, it's like Bhuanaji 2.0 kind of thing. This is. It's no longer the first version. That is, it's a whole. It's totally new software. Is already in the making already. That is. And your spouse, for example, or your colleagues, your friends, everybody will start looking at you totally differently. It transforms your life completely. That is.
Right.
That's what I meant by that. And it starts like a fire. That is, Then you want to study more. You want to study more.
Excellent discussions. So let's take the next 15 minutes and quickly glance through the topic. So the first topic is Shankaracharya starts with one clear definition, because a lot of people get confused. I do Bhakti Yoga, I do Hatha Yoga, I do Nada Yoga, I do Karma Yoga, everything is leading to moksha. That idea is negated in verse 2. That is the first thing he did. He said, if your problem is ignorance, what is the solution? Knowledge. So what can liberate you? It is very clearly laid out. Knowledge. Only knowledge can liberate you, because the problem is not that you are lacking something. I was talking to Swami Saropriyananda. He gave a beautiful example. He said, let's say that I forgot the fact that I'm sitting in New York and I want to go to New York. How can I go to New York? Can I take a plane to go to New York? Is it possible? Because I'm sitting in New York. It's impossible. Can I meditate and get into New York? No. Can I pray and get into New York? I just need to understand the fact that I'm sitting in New York. So that's what it is. So I need to know, who am I? And in this, Atmabodha, Shankaracharya uses one brilliant teaching methodology, which is known as Swapna Drishtanta. Swapna Drishtanta means the dream analogy. So while you are in a dream, you think that I am conditioned by the dream space and dream time and the dream suffering. And that suffering will not go till I realize that I am the waker. Till that dream identity is there. It's okay to have that dream identity, but if you forget your real identity and if you limit yourself with the dream identity only, any problem you encounter in the dream, that becomes a problem. But the moment you have a realization that it is a lucid dream, means when you have a lucid dream, what happens? You know that you are dreaming and you are still in the dream. So you may have to encounter the situation, but you will encounter the situation becomes it becomes a situation to be handled. That's the difference between a problem and a situation. This is a brilliant definition given by Swami Dayananda Saraswati. So he tells, until you realize your own true nature, everything in the world will be a problem. But the moment you get that realization, for example, I have a disease. It's a situation that needs to be handled, nothing more than that. So that change will happen. So that's why the knowledge is the only means for the realization. When I say only means, don't think that it is fanatic. We are not saying that this knowledge, any body of knowledge through any tradition that liberates you is the only means. That's it. So that is the first point. The second point is, then you may ask me, why am I prescribed? Means, why are you giving me karma yoga? Or why are you asking me to do prayer? Or why are you asking me to go and do the hatha yoga or the pranayama? What is the connection between these other disciplines with knowledge? Why don't I drop everything and go and learn the knowledge? Anybody remember the answer?
To become eligible,
Because let's say that you are sitting in New York and you wanted to go to New York and you're desperate. I need to be in New York today. But if my mind is agitated, suppose a teacher comes and tells you that you are in New York, you won't even recognize it. So first your mind should be in a stage to receive this knowledge or the teaching. So every other yoga is for me to clear my mind. There are two things we said, right? One is called the chitta shuddhi, the purity of the mind. And the second thing is called the stability of the mind. So every other yoga, which can be on a high level basis, if you follow the Atmabodha Vedanta tradition, it can be categorized into two categories. One is called karma yoga. The other is called upasana yoga. Karma yogas help me to purify my mind. Mala nivritti. And upasana yoga helps me to stabilize my mind. That is, these two, purity and stability, are absolute must-have for the knowledge to take place. So this is the spiritual journey. So from where I am, I need to get into, means I need to do karma yoga. I need to do upasana yoga. And once the karma yoga and upasana yoga takes me to a stable, purified state, I can, these Upanishad teachings will start talking to me and I will start realization. So that is the spiritual journey roadmap. There is nothing, because Shankaracharya gives some beautiful example in the Atmabodha. It's like the sun is covered by cloud. The sun is there, right? The karma yoga of the wind, if that can take away, means your cloud, what is going to happen? The sun becomes visible. It's not that sun was not there. So this is the spiritual roadmap. And then the question is, if my real nature is Atma, which is the consciousness, why I see myself as a body, why I see myself as a mind, it is known as the problem of superimposition, adhyasa. So verse 10 to 16 talks about that. The problem is what? I think, for example, I have a mind, I have a body. What I take myself? I take myself as the body. I take myself as the mind. So the beautiful example given is a crystal in front of a cloth. Let's say that if there is a crystal and a blue cloth is in front of that cloth, means crystal, how do you see the crystal? Blue. That is the superimposition. But is that blueness is part of the crystal? Absolutely not. So Just like that, in a dream, I identify myself as the dream body. For example, if I get sick, do you think that means somebody got a heart disease in the dream? Which heart has problem? Is his heart in the bed, or is the heart in the dream world? It is the heart in the dream world, correct? So that is why you get identified with the other objects. So that problem of superimposition is the root cause of all the sufferings. That is what is covered in verse 10 to 16. And from verse 17 to 20, if I'm not the body, if I'm not the mind, if I'm not the intellect, who am I? That answer is given. So 17 to 20, Shankaracharya tells, I'm not the body. I have a body, but I'm not the body. I have a mind, but I am not the mind. So who am I? So I am defined as the consciousness. And I made it very clear. The consciousness, the definition of the consciousness we have here is completely different from the definition of consciousness we have in the neurology. In neural science, consciousness is defined as an attribute of the mind. Here, the consciousness is that which make me aware of my mental activity. That is what the definition of the consciousness is. So it is because of the consciousness I can see my mental activity. And we say that there is only one consciousness in the entire universe. So when that consciousness illuminates the thoughts of my mind, I feel that I am that mind. So there is a localization. So a brilliant example given by Shankara in the Atmabodha is, if you have multiple ports, every port has a port space. But how many space is there, in fact? There is only one space. Then who created this separation? It is the port that created the separation. So it is the body and the mind that created the separation. There is only one all-pervading consciousness. This consciousness is everywhere in the universe. When that consciousness gets reflected through the body and the mind, there is a sense of I-ness develops. And then what happens? I attach myself with that sense of I-ness and I get suffered. So that's what the third topic. So the problem of superimposition. So under the problem of superimposition, we came across the three types of bodies we have. We came across the physical body. We understood what is subtle body, and we understood what is causal body, and we understood the so-called soul. The soul definition of a soul is, it is the subtle body. So what happens when somebody physically dies? His physical body come to an end. The subtle body transmigrates from one body to another body, and nothing happens to Atma. This portion we did elaborate discussion, and hope that is clear. If not, please post questions. We can discuss that topic again. We did a supplement lesson on the Bhagavad Gita class also. What is the difference between body, soul, and Atma? So this is very important. Soul is again a loosely translated definition. I talked about this in the Gita class also, right? You need to understand what exactly the metaphysical framework we are using to understand the scripture. So when you use a biblical metaphysical framework to understand our thing, it confuses, because the definition of the soul in biblical term is different. So we need to understand what is a soul. Soul here means it is a subtle body which transmigrates from one body to the other. So all that topics we discussed. And then false attribution of mental activity. So typically what happens when the mind is sad, I feel that I am sad. And when the mind is happy, I feel that I am happy. How do I develop an attitude that I can separate myself from the mental activity and look at the mental activity? So that is the skill, means this false attribution of mental activity. What happens is I just get identified with that mental activity. And when I get that identified with that mental activity, I get suffered. This is the problem. So a simple example, again used by Shankaracharya, is the dream. Just think, close your eyes and think in a dream what is happening. You won a lottery in the dream. What exactly is happening? You got identified yourself with a different time, different space, different objects. Who created that dream world? My mind, right? Who created that dream body? My mind. So I get and I think that I am an entity in that dream world, because when I'm chased by a tiger in a dream, I'm afraid. So I get identified with a mental activity and get suffered. So you need a skill to understand what is a mental activity and stay apart from that. This is what is described, this false attribution of the mental activity. You need to, this is means we are going to do the nidithyasana, etc. It's coming. So these practices will help you to separate yourself from the mental activity and look at that objectively. So the whole yoga, the Patanjali Yoga Sutra classes, we are going to start that in March. That is a brilliant set of teaching. How do you detach yourself from these mental activities and look at that mental activity very objectively? Even the Sutra 3 and 4 is brilliantly explained this, right? So when you have the control of the mind, what happens? Patanjali tells, Tada drishtuhu swarupe avasthanam. You are identified with your own true nature, which is Atma. Otherwise, what happens? Vritti sarupya mitaratra. You get identified with the mental activities and you suffer. This is the topic we covered so far. So we talked about the spiritual journey. Understand that it is Karma Yoga, Upasana Yoga, Jnana Yoga. And you understand Jnana, or the knowledge, is the only means for liberation. We understood the problem of superimposition. We understood means what is consciousness. The key thing you need to understand is there are many physical body. Every physical body will have one subtle body. Every physical body will have one subtle body. And then may or may not have, right? Dead bodies would not have subtle body, because if there is a physical body, subtle body is there. And how many Atmas are there? There is only one Atma in the entire universe. So we talked about that. And then if I am the all-pervading Atma, why am I get identified myself as Rajesh or body, etc.? It is the problem of superimposition. And the classic example of that superimposition is that the crystal example. Please remember that, because if you haven't seen that crystal, you think that that crystal is blue. So like that, you think that when I have sadness in my mind, the sadness is different from me, but I identify myself as sadness. In this Atmabodha, Shankaracharya gives a beautiful another example. Suppose certain powders give flavors to water. Suppose you put some tang. When you drink the water tastes like orange. From where the orange taste come? Is that an inherent property of the water, or is that something else? It is the superimposition. So like that, you identify with your mind, you identify with the body, you identify with your intellect and get suffered. I referred one book during this class. If you have read this book, also talks about the same idea, which is the search inside yourself. They don't talk, of course, about Atma, but at least the necessity of separating yourself from the mental activities. Even that book has one chapter when I was reading, I was thinking like whether I'm reading Vedanta or this. In one example, he tells like there is a huge difference between I am angry versus I have anger in me. That's a huge difference. Anybody read that book?
Yes, Rajesh.
Yeah. So you came across this portion, Gina, right? This is called out very much. So I would suggest one book for you, a small booklet. It is called Art of Contemplation. It is by Swami Chinmayananda. It's a very small book which has 5 meditation practices. And in that book, there is a second chapter. There is a brilliant meditation. It's just 99 cents or there in Amazon, like you can buy in Kindle. So in this second chapter, Swami Chinmayananda just asks you to imagine that you are sitting on the top of a mount. The bottom of the mount, in the valley, there is a temple. You can see that temple from a long distance. So suddenly you see a lot of people going into the temple. And you hear a beautiful singing and the sound of the bell and the chanting and the arati. So you cannot see what is happening inside, but you can listen that very well. This is a brilliant meditation. Now, just sit for a moment. You are an entity sitting separately and listening to these sounds. These sounds is outside you. So then Swamiji slowly guide you to your mind. Look at the mind just like you look at that temple. Look at the mind objectively, right? When you chant Om Namah Shivaya, just see the mind chanting Om Namah Shivaya. Or if you are observing your breath, observe it separately. Means the observer is different. Just like you are listening to that temple songs, you listen to your mind. You try to see your mental activity. This is a wonderful meditation technique. It's an advanced meditation, but it's brilliantly described. So this book can be used. That is exactly what is being talked. False attribution of the mental activity. That is the topic from verse 20 to 27 we covered. So this is the topics we covered, and we are going to proceed further with the next teaching. Actually, one of the most beautiful topic of the Vedanta is coming, which is Nididhyasana. So we need to understand what is the difference between a conventional meditation, which is known as an Upasana, versus a Nididhyasana. So we will try to understand that in detail. So it's 9:20. Any questions or comments? Otherwise, I will pick up two questions I received. Both of them are really good questions. So we wanted to discuss that also. But before that, any comments or questions on this topic?
If anybody needs that book, Search Within Yourself, it's in our library.
Excellent. Please read that book. That is really good book. I strongly recommend that book.
Rajaji, you can answer this question after those two questions, if that makes sense.
Yep.
But I have always wondered that is jnana the goal of upasana and karma yoga?
What is the goal?
So
goal is self-realization, right? My goal is to understand myself. Jnana is only a means, right? So my goal is not to master Upanishad. My goal is to use the Upanishads and understand who I am. So that is the ultimate destination.
But, sorry, Rajaji, but doesn't jnana happen spontaneously once you reach the ultimate destination? Like once you gain self-realization, you gain the knowledge that you are Atma.
Yeah. So, but how do you know that? Because it is the 10th man story. You heard about the 10th man story?
Yes.
So in the 10th man, how did he realize?
By himself, because he heard from the 9th man.
He heard from a passerby.
Yeah.
Correct? So that is the knowledge. So Swami Vivekananda gives a beautiful example. I always quote this example. Imagine that there is a diamond lying under a pond. You want to get that pond. So first imagine that pond is dirty and that pond is turbulent. First of all, somebody has to tell you, right? A wise person okay, there is a diamond lying in that pond. So you go to the pond, look at the pond, nothing is seen. So even though he has knowledge, it's not working. Correct? So what is the first step? Clean the pond.
Yeah.
Till it is turbulent. You don't see the diamond. I do all the activities, but still I don't see the pond. So the diamond. So somehow I made the water calm. When the pond is pure and it is calm, And then if somebody can direct me to that,
I'll be able to see it.
yeah. So when my mind is completely impure, or turbulent, it will not work.
Right.
So that's exactly the question you asked in the group also, right? The other day, somebody was asking, what is the role of Karma Yoga and Upasana Yoga? So I answered, both Karma Yoga and Upasana Yoga are prerequisites for understanding myself. Because Shankaracharya in the Atmabodha gives a brilliant example. You want to cook food. What exactly cooks the food? What is the direct means of cooking the food? Fire.
Heat.
Fire, right? It
Right.
is the fire that cooks the food.
Hmm.
The energy of the fire is what cooks the food. No doubt about it. But you need supporting accessories. You need the vessel. You need water. Without the vessel and water, you cannot cook even though you have the fire and rice, you cannot cook it. So like that, knowledge is the only means for liberation. But the knowledge to work, you need the other two. Don't worry, this is the most confusing topic of Vedanta. So many people say, Karma Yoga is going to take you to the end destination, or no, only knowledge. But suppose you may ask, right? Suppose a person, like a person who has not even studied scriptures, how does that happen?
He practices Karma Yoga and
Once you have pure mind and a calm mind, it's very easy. If he has the sufficient samskaras, he will see himself.
Right.
So he may not need to study the whole scriptures, but the very fact that he see himself, that means he got the knowledge. That's it. So whether you call it as Jnana Yoga or whether you call it as an accidental discovery, but for you to discover that, see, if there is a clean pond and a diamond lying there, accidentally you happen to be there. If you look into the bottom of the pond, what happens? You'll see it. So Vivekananda told that people as ripe souls. They come to this world with almost the necessity for the realization. So there are different use cases can be called out. But the fact is that you need a means Karma Yoga, Upasana Yoga, Jnana Yoga are the meanses. So depending upon your maturity and where you stand, you need to use the appropriate tools.
Right. I was just thinking Vijayji and Rajeshji, right? So when you say that Jnana and Karma Yoga and Upasana Yoga are the tools. So like, you first purify your mind and you stabilize your mind, and then you use Jnana to direct you towards liberation.
Yeah. Then what happens? The Jnana is going to work. Okay. So now you may ask, now you are studying Jnana. So it's like the first time, go back to Vivekananda's story. Somebody told that there is a diamond in the pond. So, but that is not my experience. So I go to the pond.
Yeah.
Then I employ. No, I'm not there. So I have to, first of all, I have to have faith in the master's word, right?
Yeah.
I can easily think that this fellow was bluffing and I can go back. I will be the sufferer. So this is the brilliance of these masters like Vivekananda or Shankara. They give this brilliant examples.
So that's the clarity.
Yeah, no, if you don't mind, let me answer the other two questions.
Please.
Yeah, then we will come back to your question also. So the first question was from Rohitji. So Rohitji, I think I answered the first portion. What is the scope of the Vedanta? We talked about that. Vedanta means any body of knowledge which is in line with the subject matter of the Upanishads. Upanishads are nothing but the end portion of the Veda, and the Upanishads teach us about myself. And the literal meaning of the word Upanishad means, Upa means closest. And Sat means means it's a definite knowledge about the closest thing. What exactly is the most closest thing for me? It is myself. So literal meaning of the Upanishad is a definite knowledge of myself. Some of you might have heard that it is sitting close to a master and learning it. That's another meaning. But this is the meaning used by Shankaracharya in the Katha Upanishad. So I'm talking with traditional support. So this is what Upanishad. Now, the second part of your question was, then why different masters interpret the same Bhagavad Gita, the same Upanishad, the same Vedanta in different ways? And you specifically asked, what is Dvaitam, what is Vishishta Dvaitam, and what is Advaitam, why they are totally appears to be different. Am I right, Rohitji? This is what the question was?
Yeah, that's true. I mean, one is Purusa and the Prakriti, other is, Atma is separate from Brahman. So why, and then Advaita.
Why there is a huge difference? So very interesting question. Means even if you take the Bhagavad Gita, I'll tell you, like if you take ISKCON book and if you take say Swami Dayananda's book, it appears to be totally opposite.
Yes.
The reason is, one is looking at the teaching through the lens of Dvaita. So what is the base answer is, the same truth can be seen through different point of views. And Dvaita, Advaita and Vishishta Dvaita are 3 point of views of the same truth. The best explanation I have heard is again from Swami Dayananda Saraswati. He was telling this brilliant example. If you think about wave, ocean and water, the Dvaitin will say that a wave is born out of water. Sorry, the wave is born out of the ocean, and the wave is sustained by the ocean. Finally, the wave goes back to ocean. So what is the relationship between the wave and the ocean? Ocean is the god of the wave.
Master and child, yeah.
Correct. It is true. That's exactly what ISKCON interprets. That is what all these Gaudiya Vaishnava tradition interprets. God is different from me. I am a servant of the God. That is totally fine. It's a point of view. Now, Ramanuja tradition means the Dvaita tradition is Madhavacharya. He is the one who formulated that particular interpretation. The Ramanuja tradition, which is the Vishishta Dvaita tradition, they say the same thing. They looked at the same ocean and the same water. So same ocean and the wave. And for them, it was like the wave is a part of the ocean. Right? It is the difference between the whole and the part. So they say, yeah, the Jiva is a part of the Ishvara. Again, they are true. That's another point of view. Now, when you come to Advaita, the same wave and the ocean, the Advaitin will say that, what is the reality of the ocean?
Water.
Water. What is the reality of the wave?
Water.
Water. So the reality of the ocean is the reality of the water. So in essence, the wave and the ocean are same. So the same truth is interpreted through 3 different point of view is Dvaitam, Advaitam, Vishishtadvaitam. Now Bhagavad Gita is a body of knowledge which talks about the reality or the truth. So when each of these masters see it through different lenses and different angle, multiple interpretations came in. So the practical difficulty is a person who just go and buy enthusiastic person who want to study Bhagavad Gita. It happened to me. Like initial times I wanted to study Bhagavad Gita. So I thought, okay, typically you want to study, you buy 3-4 books. You buy 3-4 books and you look at one verse in one book and the other verse in another book. Totally contradicting. So this is because if you don't understand the framework through which that interpretation is made, it would be confusing. And that's why they say the scriptures needs to be studied through a teacher.
Master.
So the teach, and also you don't switch the teacher in between, right? Because one teacher would be teaching in Advaita, the other one is in Dvaita. So just follow the teacher for some time, understand make a good understanding of that path, and then you will appreciate the other path. So if I say that Dvaitam is wrong, that is not correct. If I say that Advaita is the only vision, that is also not correct. Both Dvaitam and Advaitam and Vishishtadvaitam are three different point of views, and you can pick and choose what you want. And if you follow Dvaitam, they don't talk about these Karma Yoga, Upasana Yoga, all those sequencing, etc. Not at all. But still, without you knowing, you will reach the destination somehow or the other. Maybe this life, maybe it may take another life, but so one more example, right? Somebody was giving an example. Suppose I'm going to a temple on the top of a hill. I can take a helicopter. I can take a bus. I can climb through multiple paths. All of them lead to the same destination. So like that, Karma Yoga will take you to the final destination. Jnana Yoga will take you to the final destination. This question was asked to Swami Dayananda. His answer was absolutely different. Yogas may take you to the beginning of the temple, but for how many doors are there to see you the Lord? Sanctum Sanctorium. There is only one door. The person came through the helicopter, or the person walked, or the person took a car. Everybody has to go through that one door and see the Lord. So like that, Jnana, whether you call it as Jnana, or whether you call it as a spontaneous realization, or whether you call it as something else, you can see only through that awareness and knowledge. So Rohitji, that is the brief explanation of your Dvaita, Advaita, Vishishta Advaita. This is a big topic. We can explore this further.
Thank you, Rajesh.
Pradeep ji, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay. So let me take 3-4 minutes extra. Sorry for that extra 4 minutes delay, but let me answer that. Pradeep ji's question is, when Bhuvanaji, you had this question also earlier. So the question is, when somebody passes away, people used to say, rest in peace, let the soul rest in peace. Is that a correct usage? Let me give my personal interpretation. I'm not going to a religious interpretation or anything like that. It's okay, right? You say rest in peace. That usage came from the biblical tradition. In the biblical tradition, what exactly happens to a soul at the time of death?
Afterlife.
It goes to a suspended state, and finally, what happens? A day of judgment will be there. In that day of judgment, based upon your actions, you will be judged to a permanent hell or a permanent heaven. So the intent, the true intent of that usage is, you will have a peaceful, suspended, animated state, and finally, when you resurrected, you go to the peaceful final destination. That is what is salvation. So this is the original intended meaning. But if you take that meaning and apply to our definition of soul, what is soul? Soul is that entity which transmigrates to another body. So when you wish, may your soul rest in peace,
You don't want it to transmigrate.
Yeah, no, you can transmigrate. Even if you transmigrate, you get into a conducive body which helps you physically, emotionally, and spiritually. That's the intended meaning. So with that interpretation, perfectly used. That's what I personally use when I wish, when I pray, may that soul rest in peace, means may he get ultimately, what is the time the soul get ultimate peace? When the soul
Liberation, right?
It's moksha, right? Yeah.
May he get moksha, may that soul get moksha, or may his journey or his or her journey to a conducive environment. So with that meaning, it is totally fine. Again, this is purely my way of interpretation. I'm not quoting from any scripture or anything that I'm just talking from my way of interpreting it.
But does it also mean that, are we saying that, may the soul rest in peace in between the transmigration state?
Yes. Actually, biblical term, it is what it is. And yeah, in means that let that transmigration be smooth, and let that be let that
A conducive environment is what you're saying, right? Yeah.
Good.
Very.
Okay, so we are
Thanks,
back.
Sanjay. Thank you.
Yeah, good questions, Rajesh. I think they deserve probably a little bit more time, but we had to kind of rush through that one. It's very important questions and urgent questions. Yes, especially the first two questions were
but
absolutely.
this RIP didn't come from our scripture. It
No,
came
even
from
rest in
only...
peace didn't come from our scriptures.
No, that's what I'm saying. The Christians use the RIP a lot.
With a different meaning. With a different meaning.
Different meaning, right? So why should we use that? Why can't we say something else?
There is nothing wrong in using that, because I personally feel that if it is in line with our thinking, why don't we use it? Because 90% of the people uses that, whether we like it or not. So why don't we use with this intent, which is good?
It depends on the audience too, right? I mean, if the whole idea is to convey your condolences,
that's a standard usage in the modern world. But so you may, and you cannot avoid the word soul. There is no equivalent of soul in Sanskrit. That's what I said, like, which metaphysical framework you use to interpret this usage. Because the Christian whole theology is based upon this Greek type of metaphysical framework. So there, and that framework is used because there is no conventional rebirth. At the time of the death, what is going to happen? Even if it is a boy, a small child, after a few hours of life, if he or she passes away, it goes to a suspended animated state and then will be judged. So that is the framework. That is the metaphysical framework. So in our case, it is different. We believe in karma. Karma has a different metaphysical framework. So when you interpret rest in peace or any such scriptural iteration, you need to make sure that which metaphysical framework is used to understand that. I'm not saying that one is greater than or the other. What I'm saying is that you need to understand which context you are talking, because you cannot just equate apple to oranges, because different if you go to Islamic framework, they may have a very, very, very similar metaphysical background as that of the Christians. The roots are the same. So if you go to Buddhist tradition, you can see that it is pretty much closer to our framework. Jain system, Sikh system, all that are very close. So somebody was joking, like, one is the desert-based metaphysical framework, the other is a river-based metaphysical framework. Both has its own. It's good. Every culture is good. Let's keep that.
Are we the river or the desert?
What is that?
Are we the river or the desert?
We are river. Into river, right? The whole.
But I think by doing, repeating this again and again, this RIP, we are kind of putting it into our system also. We say, Atma ko shanti mile.
That's what I was telling.
But how many people, suppose somebody in work pass away, can you write Atma? You need to make sure, see, the language is for communication. You need to make sure that it is reaching the other place. If you say Atma ko shanti mile, of course, if an Indian who is understanding all these things, say that. But when you talk to a general audience, you may have to follow conventions. I cannot say that I'm sitting in a, again, it is all my personal take. Each one of you are completely free.
You're right. I always say, may his soul get Sadgadi. That's how I say it. Sadgadi means I feel like it's good Gadi wherever he goes. We can only pray. It is all destined. Whatever he is going to get is destined.
Absolutely. So my point is, like, suppose somebody, means even yesterday I had somebody telling me, like, her mother passed away. If I say, may you get Sadgadi, she may not even understand it.
Correct.
Yeah.
So when I say rest in peace, that's exactly what I mean. So there is, we have to.
How about Om Shanti?
Om Shanti also.
They won't know. They won't know that.
They won't know, Arnabji. Like, Shanti has a bigger word. Even Hindus doesn't know the meaning. So
ultimately, their own karma will define their destination.
Correct.
This is just, we do for our own satisfaction. We do that, and
we studied in the 8th chapter, right? So Krishna, what did he say? Tasmat sarveshu kaleshu ma manusmaradu, means yutyaja. Arjuna's question was, what happens to a person in his last moment? Think about you. Krishna said, the last moment your mental makeup is determined by the whole life of karma. So the exact verse he uses, tasmat sarveshu kaleshu ma manusmara yutheja. You see, this is a big misinterpretation. People read 8th chapter and say that you just remember the God at the last moment, you're saved.
For that, you need to
Rajesh.
practice.
Yeah.
Rajesh, the only one request I have to everyone is don't abbreviate RIP. At least write it. Take 2 minutes to write it down.
Correct.
Rest in peace.
Super.
Right? If you care about that person.
Correct.
Very true.
Yeah,
Very
yeah.
true.
It looks like a dome, in a cemetery to me when I say
Correct.
RIP.
Exactly.
People abbreviate it so much. All they do is that namaste thing. Put 2 or 3 of those namaste things. That's it.
Yeah.
Getting very easy.
Good.
Yeah.
Very good discussions. We took 15 minutes extra, but next week.
Rajesh, actually, I would like to request that, the first 2 questions, if Pradeep ji and Rohit ji, if they think through again, they have some follow-up questions, I think we should go through that. It's very important that.
Next week.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Mm.
Please post.
Yeah.
Please post all the questions in the WhatsApp group, and all the questions I get, I try to answer this in the general forum.
Yeah.
So that everybody will be benefited. These questions are really, really good questions.
Yeah.
Arnabji, I didn't come to your second question. Please post in the WhatsApp group. We will do that.
Yes, definitely.
Okay. Okay. So thank you. So so we will have Bhagavad Gita 2 sessions continuing. Like Sunday we have one, and Tuesday we have one, and March we are starting Patanjali Yoga Sutra, which is one of my favorite book.
So when will be that class, Rajesh ji?
11:30 in the morning, because we are considering the Europe, India, US time.
Weekends?
Sunday 11:30 in the morning. So that is the time. So I'm really, really looking forward to that. We started that earlier. We could not complete it, but this time we are determined to complete it. It is the essence of yoga. It is the essence of meditation. All the meditation techniques we practice. It is such a wonderful. I'm happy that I'll get an opportunity to learn it properly.
Bhuvaji, there'll be recordings of it on YouTube, so don't worry about it. I know you have a
Because our music class ends only at 11:30, and morning we have yoga class, music class.
Everything comes live in YouTube now. So immediately.
Yeah, but I just clicked on the link which you posted in our group. You're wearing a different shirt and you're talking something else.
No, that is
right here in this when you're looking at this on the top left, you can see live on YouTube.
Yeah.
If you click on that, you should see the link right there.
Yeah, but he sent a link on the post.
No, if you go to the channel now, it should be there. At that time, it may not be there.
Yeah.
See, it comes only when you go live.
Yeah.
So Bhuvaji, you might be seeing a previous video, previous recording.
Yeah, now I see you.
Okay, yeah. The technology is so good. You can go
I'm
live.
like wondering, you told me to click on it, and I just clicked, and you're wearing a maroon shirt and you're talking about Vedanta. This doesn't mean anything to me.
But that is it's live. So it will be only when I'm sitting there.
Right.
Okay.
So that must be but I thought this is our first session, right? So
No,
why would I see a different
not
session?
Atmabodha, but there were Bhagavad Gita classes we were live.
Oh.
Technology is so advanced, you can wear 2 shirts in different same.
Okay.
You can wear 2 shirts at the same time.
Yeah.
Simulcast.
Okay, so Bhuvaji, could you chant if you don't mind?
Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamevavasishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om. Shri Gurubhyo Namaha.